Fortress Europa is a two-player game that recreates the Allied campaign in Western Europe from the D-Day invasions in 1944 to March 1945. This is a game that was designed by John Edwards in 1978, originally published by Jedco Games. In 1980, the Avalon Hill Game Company published a second edition of the game, and this is the Designer's Signature Edition by Compass Games. This is the third edition, with redesigned and supersized components. Fortress Europa follows in the footsteps of its predecessor, the Russian Campaign, also designed by Edwards, a game which introduced the innovative concept of double impulse turns, where a side moved its units, conducted combat, and then moved its units once again and resolved combat a second time during its turn. This mechanic recreated the great battles of encirclement that occurred in World War II and forced players to maintain reserves and defend in depth. In Fortress Europa, the Allied player has to choose an invasion site, make a successful landing, break out of the beachhead, and drive across France towards Germany. The German player has to prevent the Allied invasion or conduct an orderly withdrawal across France, delaying the Allies as much as they can and counterattacking when there is an opportunity. The units in this game are mostly divisions with some brigades, regiments, and even some battalions represented. Each hex on the map represents 25 miles and each turn about 1 week of actual time. The game includes two map sheets that, when put together, form a surface area of 34 by 43 inches. The map has a hex grid that regulates the movement and location of the playing pieces. The game also includes 518 5/8 of an inch counters. These counters represent the military formations of the Allies, that is the United States, the United Kingdom, and France on one side, and the German side, which includes Wehrmacht units as well as SS and Luftwaffe formations. Here we see the German 85th Infantry Division. The unit's counter contains the following information: the unit's designation, the unit's size, the unit type, which describes the unit's composition, and these unit types are further classified in the game as armored or non-armored units. The combat factor, which represents the unit's strength on attack and defense. The movement factor is expressed as a number of movement points. And the setup coordinate, which is used as an aid to set up the game using the order of battle displays. In this game, most units have two steps. Their front side shows the unit at full strength, while their back side shows the unit at reduced strength, as denoted by a white stripe at the top of the counter. The game also includes numerous player aids. Two identical player aid cards, which contain various charts and tables, one German player aid card, one Allied player aid card, a two-sided aircraft mission chart. One side is used in the standard game, and the other side is used if playing with the optional advanced air system. There are German and Allied initial setup displays, and there are also German and Allied arrival schedule displays where players place the reinforcements that will enter the game on specific turns. There's an order of battle display for each side for the Battle of the Bulge scenario. The game also includes a 36-page rulebook. The standard game rules cover 28 pages, and in addition to the full campaign scenario, there are also 4 shorter scenarios. For the Allies to win, they must control Paris and Brussels, plus either 4 major cities in Germany or 15 cities in Germany. And the Germans win by avoiding the Allied victory conditions. Let's take a look at the sequence of play. The initial segment is composed of 3 phases. In the turn record phase, we advance the turn marker one space on the turn record track. Next, the Allied player rolls a die and consults the weather chart to determine the weather for the turn, and weather has an effect on the movement of ground units as well as the availability of air units. The Allied player and then the German player allocate aircraft units on the aircraft mission chart. Next is the Allied player turn. The Allied player takes replacements and, starting with turn number 2, rolls for the availability of the French partisan counter. The Allied player moves his units, as allowed by the movement allowance chart, places aircraft, and checks for reinforcements, withdrawals, and any developments. He also may move units by sea. Next, the Allied player resolves combat, and he may use his air units assigned to ground support missions at this time. Then comes the Allied second move impulse, where the Allied player can now move again his units, those units, of course, that were not in enemy zones of control, and their movement is limited by the movement allowance chart. Headquarters may move now up to their full movement allowance, and units may also move by sea. Next comes the Allied second combat impulse, and here the Allied player resolves combat once again, and he may use units assigned to ground support missions. Now the Allied player adjusts railhead markers to denote the extent of rail hexes still under German control. And finally, the Allied player checks his units to see if they are out of supply, and units found out of supply lose one step. Next is the German player turn. Here the German player conducts the very same phases that the Allied player conducted, but using his units. The Germans do not use sea movement, but they do use rail movement. And finally, during the turn end segment, both sides remove all aircraft units from the map and aircraft mission chart, and all can't move markers from units that received replacements during this turn. We have the game set up. The German units are in each of their military districts. We will be taking a look at each one of those, and we will be showing the units that start there, including the hidden units. And then we will play one turn and conduct the invasion sequence. We'll be using the sequence of play cards, including this card, which shows us the invasion sequence. Here we see one side with the first impulse, and the other side shows us the invasion sequence for the second impulse. Now each turn begins with the turn record phase, and here we advance a turn marker one space on the game turn record track. Because this is the first turn where we will have the invasion, we will simply place the marker on the June 1st turn space. The next phase is the weather determination phase, and because this is the June 1st turn, this is skipped and the weather is considered clear. Next is the air allocation phase. First, the Allied player allocates his aircraft on the aircraft mission chart. We see the aircraft mission chart. The Allies always have 11 air units. Of these, 6 are American and 5 are British. The Americans have 2 strategic and 4 tactical air units. The British, 2 strategic and 3 tactical air units. There are various missions, and there are specific requirements for each of the missions in terms of whether strategic and or tactical air units can participate in both. Let's set up the chart, and then we will go through each one of the missions. We've placed the 11 units on the mission chart, and let's take a closer look. There's one British bomber counter placed on the U-boat attacks, and here if the Allied player does not allocate any unit to this mission, then the Germans cause that the Americans lose half of their replacement factors for the turn. Here we see the Allied replacement chart. The Americans received during each turn of the month of June, 3 infantry and 1 armored replacement point. But if they don't allocate any air unit to the U-boat attack mission, they will lose half of these points. Now we see that the Allies also allocated 1 Bomber Command Air Unit, strategic, to the V1 site attack mission. And similarly to the U-boat mission, if no unit is allocated here, then the British lose half of their replacement factors for the turn, fractions rounded down. Now this possible loss of replacement point is over if the Allies capture all the U-boat bases that you see here. And they're basically in the Bay of Biscay. You have U-boat bases near Bordeaux, La Rochelle, also Saint-Nazaire and Lorient. The British loss of replacement points ceases if the Allies capture the V1 sites shown here, which are located in the Pas de Calais area. And we see that the Allies allocated 3 American units, 1 SAC and 2 TAC units to railway attacks. The Germans have a railway capacity of 6 units per turn, and for each Allied air unit allocated to this mission, that capacity is reduced by 2. So that means that if the Germans don't counter or cancel any of those units there, they will not be able to move any units by rail in this turn. There's 2 British tactical air units assigned to strafing. This mission allows the Allies to affect any German units moving 3 or more hexes, in which case you roll 1 die, and if the die roll is equal or less than the number of units allocated to this mission, that unit loses 1 step. So in this case, if the Germans don't cancel any of these units, a 1 or 2 will cause 1 step loss on each German unit that moves 3 or more hexes. And there's 1 British tactical unit assigned to bridge attacks. In this case, each such unit can be placed over a particular river on the map, and it will affect any German unit trying to cross the river. Non-armored units have to stop upon crossing the river, and armored units have to roll on the river crossing table. So those are the missions that these units were assigned to, but now the German player now allocates his aircraft on the aircraft mission chart, and then the Allied player removes any of his aircraft that is cancelled by German aircraft. Here we see the German tactical aircraft availability chart. In each month there is a specific number of tactical air units available. You see that for June it's 6, and the 4 means that 4 units can be used maximum per turn. So we place 6 German tactical air units on the available box. Now the Germans may use up to 4 units to place to either cancel aircraft assigned by the Allies to specific missions, or to be used for German ground support missions. So the Germans have decided to use the maximum they can use in a turn in June of 44, which is 4 units. And let's see what Allied aircraft units they cancel. Here we see that 1 German tactical unit was placed on the U-boat attacks, so it cancels the only Allied strategic air unit that was placed there. So we remove both. German unit goes to the used column, and we return the Allied strategic unit to the available aircraft for use in the next turn. The Germans placed 1 air unit in the strafing box, so that cancels 1 of the Allied tactical units, leaving 1 there. And the last 2 German tactical air units are placed in the railway attacks box, canceling 2 of the 3 American units placed there. So the rail capacity for the Germans will be reduced because of 1 unit from 6 to 4 units. And we see the 4 German units that were used in this turn now in the used box. And that means for the rest of June, the Germans can only use 2 units. And now we go actually to the Allied player turn. and the Allied replacement phase, and the Allied player takes replacements. Here we see the German forces set up in the Netherlands military district. There's 3 hidden units there. Let's take a look at how the district looks without those 3 hidden units visible. And here we see the military district as the Allies would see the same. Notice that it has a substantial number of hexes which are flooded, and that stops movement in both impulses. The 2 largest cities, Rotterdam and Amsterdam, have a port capacity of 10 points each, but each is defended by coastal defense units, and Amsterdam has an extra brigade defending that city also. And because this city is very close to the German border, the Germans can bring reinforcements very quickly into the area. The next area here is the Pas de Calais area, and this is the most heavily fortified of the areas. And you can see various hexes that have gray hexsides. These are fortifications. And you see many static German divisions there. There's a total of 3 units that appear also hidden. This area is one that the Allies can bring much forces to bear. 48 infantry factors in the first impulse of the invasion, because this is the closest one to England, and 24 infantry factors in the second impulse. However, this is the most heavily defended area the Germans have. So let's take a look now at this military district without the hidden units visible. And this is what the Allies would see of the 15th military district. Here we see the 7th military district, which defends the areas of Normandy and Brittany. And you see there's also 3 hidden units in this district. Let's take the hidden units off so that you can see what the Allies would observe. And now we see the military district without any hidden units visible. Here's the area around Normandy with no hidden units visible. The port of Cherbourg has 8 supply points, and it has 3 units, and the Germans, if isolated, would be able to withhold the port for various turns, losing 1 step per turn that the port is isolated. So that's why they have concentrated their 3 units in order to deny that port to the Allies for as long as they can. And here we see the area of Brittany, as would be seen by the Allies. The hidden units are not visible. And here we see the 1st military district. It is the weakest district in terms of units defending it, but of course it is the farthest one from the German border. It has a major port, Bordeaux, with 10 supply points, and there's also La Rochelle with 3. Only 1 panzer division is in the district. No hidden units have been set up here. And finally, we have the 19th military district, which defends the southern coast of France. The major port of Marseille there with 12 points is the prize. There's additional smaller ports, and the district covers also areas of northern Italy, including the port of Genova. So now the Americans receive replacements. Normally in June they would receive 3 infantry replacements, of which 1 can be an armored replacement point, as signified by the 1 in parentheses. However, because the Germans were able to cancel the Allied unit assigned to U-boat attacks, the Americans lose half of the replacement points, any fractions rounded down. So of 3, they lose 1 replacement point, and always armored replacement points are the first to be lost. So this means that the Americans can only receive 2 infantry replacement points. And we place the American infantry replacement marker in the number 2 box. The British, on the other hand, will not lose any replacement points because they had 1 unit left in the V1 site attacks mission box. So the British receive 2 infantry replacement points. 1 of those can be armored. So the British will receive 1 infantry and 1 armored replacement point. And both markers are placed on the number 1 box of the replacement track. Now, continuing with the Allied replacement phase, if this were any other turn, but turn 1, we would roll 1 die to see if the French partisan marker comes into play. This places a zone of control in the hex it occupies and serves to block German rail movement. Now, if this would be a non-invasion turn, the next phase would be the Allied first move impulse, followed by the Allied first combat impulse, and then the Allied second move impulse, followed by the Allied second combat impulse. But because this is an invasion turn, those 4 impulses will be substituted by this invasion sequence. Okay, now we're going to start the invasion sequence for the first turn. This is the first impulse invasion sequence. First step is that the Allies select the military district to invade, and if the invasion overlaps into 2 areas, we use the lower capacity of infantry strength points that can be brought ashore, and this releases all German units. So you want to avoid overlapping into 2 areas at all times. We won't be invading in the Netherlands military district, nor in the 15th military district, because invading in either of these releases all German units in all other districts. So the choices we have are the 7th military district, which includes Normandy and Brittany, and it is at a fair distance from Paris, not so far away. And the other alternatives we have are the 1st military district. This one is farther away from the German border. And the 19th military district, which defends the southern coast of France. This is the farthest district from the German border. So we will invade in the 7th military district, and only in that district. So there will be no overlapping. And now we go to the next step. The Allies conduct bridge attacks. And there's 1 British tactical unit assigned to bridge attacks. So we place that counter on any river symbol within tactical range. Tactical range is defined as within 8 hexes of an Allied headquarters, but there's no Allied headquarters that have landed yet, or within the tactical range zone, and that is marked by this brown line here. Anything to the north is within that zone. So we will place the counter on the Oise River. So any unit, Allied or German, that attempts to cross that river, if it's an armored unit, it must roll on the river crossing chart with results that range from not being able to cross to crossing and stopping on the next hex, and also crossing and stopping on the next hex and suffering 1 step loss. If the unit is not an armored unit, it may cross the river, but it has to stop in the next hex. The next step, paradrops are conducted, and for each we roll on the paratrooper drop table. And the Allies will be invading in Brittany, that north coast from C2 to G5, and in that particular area the Allies can bring 32 infantry factors in the first impulse, and that includes the British 79th Armored Division. In the second impulse, they can bring ashore 16 infantry factors and 1 headquarters. Here we see the 32 infantry factors that will be brought in that first impulse. In addition, the Allies can bring ashore the 79th British Armored Division, although at reduced strength, and the bonus is that this division does not count for stacking purposes in that first impulse. Also in the game, the Allies can conduct 5 airdrops, and for this particular invasion, they will airdrop the American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, and that will count as 2 airdrops. And finally, the Allies will conduct a raid with the 1st Commando Brigade. Now we select the hexes where the paratroopers will attempt to land. The 82nd Airborne Division will attempt to land at C4, which is a clear hex in enemy zone of control. And the 101st will attempt to land at E5, also a clear hex in enemy zone of control. And we will roll first for the 82nd. So we roll on the first column, clear terrain, and we will refer to the result after the slash because it is in an enemy zone of control. We roll 1d6. The result is a 2, safe, landing, no effect. So the 82nd lands safely at C4. Now we roll for the 101st. And we use the same column, and it's the result after the slash because it's clear terrain in enemy zone of control. We roll 1d6, and this time the result is a 6. The unit is eliminated. So the 101st is wiped out. And unfortunately, paratroopers cannot be replaced, so the 101st is eliminated permanently from the game. Now the Allies conduct sea invasions and any accompanying raid. The sea invasion will be conducted by the American and British units that you see on top, including the British 79th Armored Division, and the raid will be conducted by the British 1st Commando Brigade. Units that invade do so in a particular beach hex, and the maximum stacking capacity is 2, but the British 79th Armored Division stacks for free and can be added to any stack. Here we see the units set up for invasion. First, the American 5th and 83rd Divisions will invade G5, the 1st American Division E4, the British 56th Brigade and the 79th Armored Division will invade F3, and the British 50th and 51st Infantry Divisions E3, where there is a German static division there. And finally, the commandos will execute a raid on hex D2. Now the Allies place naval units. These are 4 naval units, 2 American and 2 British, which are placed on the map and will provide positive gyro modifiers to attacks which are conducted on beach hexes or hexes that are 1 hex away from the beach. So these are the units that will invade. Now we place them on the invaded beach hexes. And at the end of the invasion sequence, any combat in the same hex will be resolved. And for now, it will be E3. And we've placed the naval units that will provide support. And we see the British naval units close to the British units that landed, as well as the American naval units close to the American infantry divisions that are in the vicinity of St. Malo. Next, the Allies allocate ground support. The Allies have 3 units on the ground support mission box. And the Allies will place all 3 units on E3 to support that attack there by the British. Now the German player reveals his hidden setup units, and in case of revealing a unit where a paradrop was conducted, the paradrop results may need to be modified. The Germans do have 2 units hidden in that sector. The first one is the 2nd SS Panzer Division hidden in E4, which is a mountain hex. The second unit that is hidden is the 189th Infantry Division, which was hidden in hex F4, the very same hex that was invaded by the American 1st Infantry Division, so there will be combat there. And the last step of this first impulse invasion sequence is to resolve all battles. And first we resolve where paratroopers landed on enemy units, but no modifications need to be made, and there's no hidden units German units in those hexes. So now we resolve the battles in the beach hexes, including the nasty surprise that the big red one has just discovered. So we have two battles. The battle in hex E3, where the German static unit is, and we have a battle also going on F4 with the 1st American Infantry Division, and we will go first to the battle at hex E3. So here we have the units broken down. The British have 2 infantry divisions, total attack strength of 12. The Germans, 1 coastal defense division, defense strength of 6. So we start at 2 to 1, but because there are 3 units which are assigned to air support, each unit adds 1 column shift to the right, so it is a 5 to 1 attack. And we will not use the combat factors provided by the naval support units. We will save it for the second impulse because it is most likely that attacks will have to be made on that 2nd SS Panzer Division. So here we have the combat results table. We started at 2 to 1, 12 against 6, but because of the 3 ground support units, we shift the odds 3 columns to the right, and we resolve the attack on the 5 to 1, 6 to 1 column. We roll 1d6, and the result is a 2. Defender retreats. So we see here that the attacker retreats all defending units 2 hexes. The Allies retreat the defenders 2 hexes. Notice that the American 82nd Airborne Division, because it was airdropped in this turn, its zone of control only consists of the hex which it occupies. And notice also that the British 1st Commando Brigade, because it is a commando unit, only has a zone of control consisting of the hex it also occupies. So the unit will be retreated 2 hexes. The first hex will be E4, and the second hex will be E5. And because this static unit was forced to retreat, it is now flipped to its mobile side, and it is a 2-3 unit. So the British successfully landed in hex E3, and the 3 air units that were used are placed on the aircraft mission chart for use during the next turn. So now we resolve the battle in hex F4. We have the 1st American Infantry Division with 6 strength points against the German 189th Infantry Division with 3. So that is a 2 to 1 attack, and we can add factors from the naval support units. Naval support units can affect combats up to 2 hexes away. So both American naval support units will be used, adding 4 more combat factors for a total of 10 against 3 for 3 to 1. So we locate the 3 to 1 column and we roll 1d6. And fortunately the roll is a 5, a D1 result. A D1 means that the defender takes 1 step loss of his choice and the attacker retreats any surviving defending units 2 hexes. So the defending unit takes 1 step loss, and we flip it to its reduced side, and now the Allies retreat the unit 2 hexes, so it retreats first to E5, and from there to E6. And the American 1st Infantry Division is safe for now at F4, and we flip face down the 2 naval support markers that were used. And that concludes the combat in the first impulse of this invasion sequence. So we've concluded the first impulse of the invasion sequence. Now we go to the second impulse, and we'll flip this card to follow the steps. So now we start with the second impulse of the invasion sequence. The Allies bring ashore second impulse units, placing them in any successfully invaded beach hex and or inland port, and a raid may be conducted at this time. Now the Allies in the second impulse can bring 16 infantry factors and a headquarters, and they will bring 2 British divisions and an American infantry division for a total of 16 infantry factors and Bradley's 12th Army Group headquarters. They can be placed on invasion beachhexes that were successfully invaded. Because the commando unit here, instead of executing a raid on D2, invaded hex D2, units can be placed there, and the commando unit does not count for stacking purposes. So both British infantry divisions are placed in hex D2, and the new American division that arrives in the second impulse is placed in hex F4. Finally, the headquarters does not count for stacking purposes and is placed in hex F3. Now the Allies may move their units which are not in enemy zones of control up to the maximum permitted in the movement allowance chart. Here we see the movement allowance chart. We refer now to the second move impulse column, and the Allied infantry units have 2 movement points, but these are Allied infantry units that came ashore in the first impulse. They now have 2 movement points. Those that came ashore in the second impulse have their movement points halved, so they only have 1 movement point, and in any event, any of these units can only move if they are not in enemy zones of control. So we see that all Allied units which are adjacent to the 2nd SS Panzer Division, as well as the 343rd German Infantry Division, the 21st Panzer Division, and the 3rd Airborne Division of the Germans, they cannot move at all. The only units that can actually move are those that are in hex D2. The 2 divisions that just landed in the second impulse have their movement allowance halved, so they can only move 1 movement point. So the 3rd British Infantry Division will move into D3, which is a mountain hex, and it has to stop because it ran out of movement points and also because of the mountain terrain. Now the 59th British Infantry Division will also move into D3 and will also have to stop there. And the reason for moving those units there is that now all German units that exert a zone of control on Allied units have to be attacked. So we're seeing here attacks on St. Malo, the 21st Panzer Division, the 343rd Infantry Division, the 3rd Parachute Division, and the 2nd SS Division. Lots of attacks are coming up because Allied units are in German zones of control. But now we go to the 3rd step. The Allies place a Mulberry on any invaded hex, and it can be placed in an enemy zone of control. The Mulberry unit that corresponds to the first invasion is the one that has a total of 12 supply points. The Mulberry has to be placed on a successfully invaded hex. All of them are in enemy zone of control except hex D2. And the Mulberry will be placed there. Note that it can be placed in an enemy zone of control, but because so many attacks are coming up, we want to avoid placing the Mulberry adjacent to an enemy unit. Now to step 4, and we resolve all battles. Here we see the situation, which is grim for the Allies. They have to attack 5 German units because they're in their zones of control. And some soaking off attacks will have to be made. So the 83rd American Infantry Division will attack St. Malo on its own. St. Malo has a defense of 6, but because it is a fortress hex, it is doubled to 12. So this is 6 to 12 or 1 to 2. Here we see the possible results. Note that any result other than the 6 will result in the elimination of the American division because it cannot retreat into the sea. We roll 1d6, and miraculously it a 6 is rolled and exchange, in which case both sides take one step loss of their choice and the attacker retreats all surviving defending units 2 hexes. Now the German 243rd Division is a static division. It only has one step, so it is eliminated. And the attacking American 83rd Division also loses one step. So it is now a 3-3 unit. Next, we'll see the attack on the 21st Panzer Division with a strength of 7. It will be done by the unit that is beneath the American 83rd Division, which we will now place on top. And that would be made in conjunction with the American 79th Division. So it's 11 factors against 7, a 1-to-1 attack. And we see that the odds of surviving for the Americans are slightly better. At 1-to-1, we roll 1d6. The result is a 4E2. An E2 result means that the attacker takes 2 step losses of his choice and the defender takes 1 step loss, and the attacker retreats all surviving defending units 1 hex. So the American 5th and 79th Infantry Divisions are reduced. And the defending 21st Panzer Division also suffers 1 step loss and is reduced. And now the Americans retreat the defending unit 1 hex, and the unit retreats to F6. Now we resolve the attack on the 343rd German Infantry Division, and that will be done with the American unit that is beneath the 79th Infantry Division. And this is the American 1st Infantry Division, which we've placed on the top now. So 6 against 2, this is a 3-to-1 attack. So we locate the 3-to-1 column and roll 1d6. The result is a 3 and exchange. In an exchange, both sides take 1 step loss of their choice, and the attacker retreats all surviving defending units 2 hexes. So the German unit is already reduced, so it is eliminated. And the big red one takes 1 step loss, and it is flipped to its reduced side. So 2 units left to be attacked, and here comes a sticky situation for the Allies. The British and the American units cannot participate in the same combat situation. So that means that the German 3rd Parachute Division will have to be attacked by the American 82nd Airborne Division. That's going to be a 1-to-2 attack. And then the remaining British units that are adjacent to the 2nd SS Panzer Division will be attacking that unit with the support of the naval units. And we will resolve first the attack on the 2nd SS Panzer Division. It has a strength of 8, but because it is in mountain terrain, the defense is doubled to 16. And all British units that are adjacent to the 2nd SS Panzer Division will be attacking, together with the 2 naval units. This is a total of 33 combat factors, and we divide it by 16, and it is a 2-to-1. We locate the 2-to-1 column in the combat results table, and we roll 1d6. The result is a 3E2. In an E2 result, the attacker takes 2 step losses of his choice, and the defender takes 1 step loss of his choice, and then the attacker retreats all surviving defending units 1. The Allies will reduce the British 59th Infantry Division and will eliminate the unit that is beneath the American 12th Army Group headquarters. We move the headquarters to the side. That is the British Brigade, which is the 56th Brigade. It's a 1-step unit, so it is eliminated. Now the German defending unit has to take 1 step loss, so it is flipped. to its reduced side, and now it has to retreat 1 hex. And any hex to which it can retreat, which is D4 and E5, is in a zone of control that belongs to the Allies. So that unit cannot legally retreat, and it is eliminated. So now we resolve the last combat situation, the attack on the 3rd German Parachute Division. The Americans are attacking with the 82nd Airborne 5 against 6. This is 1 to 2. We locate the 1 to 2 column and roll 1d6. The result is an AR. The attacker retreats all of his units 1 or 2 hexes. And unfortunately for the Americans, all hexes surrounding the 82nd Airborne Division are either in enemy zone of control or, like hex D4, occupied by an enemy unit. So this unit will be eliminated. Note that the German units in Lorient and Brest, which are fortified hexes, exert a zone of control on the adjacent hexes to them. However, any Allied unit that is in an adjacent hex does not exert a zone of control into the fortress, meaning that the units in the fortress would never be required to actually attack adjacent enemy units. So the American 82nd Airborne is eliminated. The next step is that the Allies place the French partisan unit. This exerts a zone of control on the hex which it occupies, so it serves to block German rail movement. And we see that from Paris there's a rail line that goes to Le Mans, so we will place the partisan unit in one of such hexes to block German rail movement into the Brittany area that has just been invaded. Now we end the invasion sequence by having the Allies set the supply capacity. The Allies have not captured any ports, so the supply capacity will start at 12, and that's equal to the strength of the Mulberry that is in hex D2. So we place a supply capacity marker in the space with the number 12. Now we deduct 1 for each Allied unit which is currently in mainland France. Note that the airborne units that were airdropped, if they would have survived their particular combat situations, would not count against this supply capacity. So the supply capacity is reduced by 11 points and is now at 1. And with the conclusion of this example of the invasion sequence, we come to the end of this video. I hope that the video has shown you some game mechanics that will give you an idea of the flow of the game and what the game has to offer. This is Stuka Joe, signing off for now. Thanks for watching.